Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Recently I saw a tulle skirt that I really liked the look of, so I decided that I would try to make it. It should be pretty simple, so I just got some tulle. I got blue and some lining to go underneath. And if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get started. For this project, I got 3 yards of tulle and a half yard of lining, which ended up being the perfect amount, which doesn't happen often. For the width, I used the full 3 yards of tulle, and the width of the lining skirt was selvage to selvage. I wasn't going to hem the tulle, so I didn't add hem allowance to it, but I did some to the lining. So the tulle was 14 inches long and the lining was 14.5 inches long. Then I needed to cut out all the ruffles for the skirt. I made them 2 inches by 3 yards and cut out 9 of them. I was originally doing it in my basement, but the tulle was really hard to see, so I moved where the floor was darker. And it was also hard because the tulle kept slipping and sliding. So in the end, I just folded it over itself a lot of times and pinned it securely so it doesn't move. And these are what all the 9 pieces looked like. They were really long. I took the 9 pieces and put them all together using a French seam so that it's more secure since the tulle is so loosely woven. A French seam is where you put the pieces wrong sides together, sew it using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, cut the seam allowance, and then put them right sides together and sew it again with another 1/4 inch seam allowance. I did this to all 8 seams. The tulle kind of kept sticking to each other on their edges, which was kind of annoying, but it makes sense considering how they're woven. Then I had to ruffle it all up, and I did this by setting my sewing machine to the highest tension and the long stitch length and running it through the center of the ruffles, and the sewing machine just gathers it for you. And this is what all the gathers were looking like, which I really liked the look of. Once that was all done, this is what they were looking like. And I thought I made enough, but when I put it up to the skirt, I realized that I needed about double the amount I just made if I wanted 3 rows of them. So I did what I just did all over again to make even more ruffles so that I had 2 identical ruffles. And I also steamed it so it looks nicer instead of the gathers going all over the place and looking really messy. Then I began to attach them to the skirt by first putting it all along the bottom of the skirt. I sewed right over the previous stitching used to gather it. I cut the ruffles once it reached the end and went on to the next line. I didn't really measure how far it was from the previous line of ruffles, though I probably should have. I just knew there were going to be 3 rows, so I eyeballed and pinned it in place, making sure it looked parallel before sewing it on like we did for the previous row. I did the same thing for the 3rd row, and this is how it looked like once they were all sewn in place. Next, I needed to gather the tulle skirt onto the lining skirt, so I put 2 parallel basting stitches along the top of the tulle and gathered it to fit onto the lining. To do this, I didn't want to waste my blue thread because I was going to take it out anyways, so I used a thread color that I had a lot of and didn't use much. Then I sewed it onto the lining in between the basting stitches. Then I removed the top basting stitch so that I could add on the waistband. The waistband was the same length as the lining of the skirt, but with a width of 3.25 inches. I cut it out of the lining and placed the remaining tulle I had over it to baste along the edges so that it was one piece. Make sure that the tulle you put over it is a little bit bigger than the piece you cut out to make sure that it fits. After cutting the excess tulle off the edges, this is what it looked like. I put it right sides together with the skirt and sewed it all along the waistline. I made sure to sew it so that the stitching used to put the tulle and lining together wasn't visible. Then I removed the other line of basting stitches, and make sure you are very careful when doing this because when I was doing it, the tulle ripped. I wasn't sure what I would do to fix it, but thankfully it was pretty close to the waistline so I could just sew it right under the waistband. And I was going to sew there anyways, so it worked out. Next, I sewed up the ends of the skirt to make it one big loop. I just sewed all 4 layers right sides together. To complete the waistband, I used the stitch in the ditch method, which is where you fold over the waistband to the wrong side of the skirt and fold over the raw edge slightly past the line of stitching used to attach the waistband to the skirt. And then you flip it to the right side so that you can sew right where that seam is. But make sure to keep a small section open so the elastic can be inserted. And this is how it looks when you finish that step. For the elastic, I used a 1-inch elastic and put it around my waist to get the length I needed. Then I used a safety pin to put it through the waistband, using the hole we left when we were sewing the waistband shut. Once that was done, I sewed together the ends of the elastic using a zigzag stitch. Then I closed up the hole in the waistband to complete this section. Now all I had to do next was hem the skirt. As I mentioned in the beginning, I only hemmed the lining of the skirt. I just did the basic double fold hem and sewed all around. And once that was done, the skirt was complete! I really liked how it turned out. It feels very wintry to me. For some reason, while I was making it, I was scared that it was going to turn out really ugly. But overall, I'm really glad how it came out. And I'm also glad that you can't even see the rip in the tulle. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time!